All right. So I want to, before we start because today we're going to talk about memory, but before we start that, I wanted to discuss mindset for a little bit because I think that's one of the things that is challenging for a lot of people as far as memory and remembering things. And that's why I asked earlier regarding if everyone's been studying or not for this class. And I'm hoping everyone's consistently studying, going over their notes, basically, right? Because once the midterm comes along, and so where's everyone at as far as being able to remember things for exams or whenever the professor calls on you? Where are you guys at with remembering information and being able to recall information and being able to share the information you might have been reading in the textbook or studying, etc., or remembering information on exams? Where are you guys as far as your feeling about being able to do that?
I remember some stuff about, mindsets, growth mindsets, but I don't really remember a lot else from my notes.
Yeah, what I'm asking about is your perspective on your ability to remember things. Where are you with that? Where's your confidence level? Where are you?
I
What
mean,
kind of messages are you giving yourself when you're trying to study and trying to remember things for exams?
I guess I get as I sort of tell myself, this is important and I need to learn it.
Okay.
It's a
So
little,
that's good because that's growth mindset, right? If you take that perspective on the information you're studying. So that's definitely good. Anybody else?
and it's a little hard because of the volume of the notes, but
I mean, I don't know. I kind of don't remember anything. I'd have to look over some of the notes and stuff again to remember most of the technical terms or whatever that we talked about. So I have confidence that I'd be able to do that. But as of right now, I am kind of in the dark. I'm kind of blanking. I don't really, I'm not really sure.
Okay. So that's good. So as far as so you're pretty confident you'd be able to, with some effort, remember the information, or are your perspective is I'll remember as much as I can, but I'm not going to remember a lot of other things? Where are
I mean,
you?
my notes are kind of like not that good. So I am confident that I could probably go back through and look at some of the lectures again if I have to, and like do some more notes in addition, which would probably be a good tool, I guess, for remembering some of the information. But as of like right now, just with what I currently have, I am only confident to say that I could probably remember the information that I already have, like some sort of thorough-ish notes on. If I went back and looked at it, yeah.
Okay. So Carolyn had mentioned that, and I think a lot of you guys have open notes exam, but what I'm trying to assess is where are you with your memory? Well, how do you feel about your memory? Because you will right now, I think a lot of exams are open notes because it is online, but you will eventually do on ground classes where you're not going to be able to take out your notes. So that's what I'm trying to find out or assess. Where are you guys as far as confidence level, as far as remembering? Well, let's just take it beyond that too, just in general, remembering things. Where are you guys with that, and your confidence level as far as remembering things? Anybody? Yes.
well, I mean, I guess I can remember some stuff, but just, we've taken a lot of notes over the semester and my typically, I haven't had a lot of time to study recently, and I'm not sure if I can, process, memorize, commit all that information to memory.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I'm pretty sure I can do the more important details, but I don't know if I can memorize like everything about the, I guess, college registration process or the
Mhm.
or every little bit about the what was it called, the something or other. But
Yeah, well, it's So you are basically prioritizing what you need to remember, which is good. Okay.
I've basically just been committing all my notes to note cards. That's why my note cards are like the size of a small mountain now.
Yeah.
But I'll figure something out. I still have 2 months.
Yeah, you will. And then today we're going to be talking about memory and how to retain a lot more information. So that's why I'm just assessing where everyone is with because I find that whenever I do this particular lecture, a lot of students have the attitude that I can't remember anything, or it's impossible for me to remember everything. So I want to just kind of clarify that, for everyone, what you want to do is come from a growth mindset as far as looking at your memory, because I think everyone can remember everything. You just have to figure out how that's going to work for you, right? And some things, yes, might be challenging, but if you can take some of the information that you're going to be looking over today, and there's information you're reading as well as the videos, I think you can remember a lot of things. You just have to figure out, well, what's the best way for yourself to do that, basically, and not come from, I never could remember, that messaging where some students will go, I never could remember everything. I could never do tests because I couldn't remember things, etc. So I'm hoping that everyone sort of moves into a more growth mindset as far as how you approach studying and as well as remembering things, because I think everyone can do that. So I'm hoping everyone's clear about that as far as mindset. That's why I wanted to cover a little bit. Anybody else about sort of your attitude towards remembering things or even taking exams? Because I know that's where your memory gets tested. Anybody else want to kind of comment on that?
I mean, typically I try to just, tell myself, you studied for this when I'm taking an exam. But I mean, I typically do that on like math exams because that's one of the things I do a good job at memorizing. But I guess it can apply to pretty much anything. I mean, if you all of a sudden sense of dread despite the fact that you studied for it,
yeah,
trying not to panic, is a good strategy to make sure you don't fail the test. Anxiety leads to bad decision making.
Yeah. So essentially not putting yourself down when you're trying to study or remember things, but just have the attitude that you will eventually get it, right? You don't have it yet, but you will. So kind of keeping that in mind when you're studying, especially for exams, right? And then learning from your mistakes, if there are mistakes, basically. Okay, so let's kind of move on to this. I'm going to give you guys a moment to read this to yourselves, and then I'll ask somebody to read it out loud. All right. I think I gave you enough time to read this. Hopefully most of you or all of you have figured out how to read this. Can someone read what's on the screen right now? Anybody can volunteer. Just unmute.
Sure, I'll try. I didn't actually finish reading it, so I'm just
gonna. Yeah, no, that's fine. Just go ahead. Anyway. Just go ahead and read it.
I couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind. According to the research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Amazing, huh?
Yeah, and so this is just an example of how your mind works. So for all of you, you had prior knowledge about words and what they look like, etc. So your brains or your synapses and neurons are connecting to basically determine what it's seeing and what it's going to read, basically. So keep that in mind, is that all of your brains are definitely these powerful sort of machines that can decipher stuff. As we move forward, just keep that in mind, because you can figure stuff out. You can definitely figure this out. Even if everything looks kind of jumbled, you can still figure stuff out. And maybe for some, it may take a little longer, some people faster, but no matter who you are, you're going to be able to figure out what's in front of you or what to memorize, etc. But I just want to kind of give that as an example of how your mind works, basically. All right. So today we're going to be covering memory and memory strategies. So we're going to talk about, first of all, the opposite, which is basically you forgetting information, right? So this is the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And this is an example of how much information that you lose once you receive it. So if you can see, this is when you receive it, right? So at the point you receive it, you can retain 100% of the information. But as you can see, as time moves on, you lose the information if you don't look at that information again, right? So pretty much in a day, you lose 50% of the information that you receive, either through the lecture or when you meet somebody, or when you read information. If you don't go over the information immediately, then you lose 50% of that information. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions about that? So what does that mean if this is the case? What does that mean?
You need to review the information to not forget.
Yes, you have to review the information often. So that's why I asked that question earlier about whether people are studying the information, because part of it is preparing, and all of you guys will have final exams for all of your classes. And so you need to be able to prepare for that exam, and that preparation starts from day one of your classes, right? So essentially what you're going to do is pretty much, I would say, and strongly suggest that right after class, you want to review your notes, right? And then maybe the next day, what you want to do is review your notes again, right? And then what happens is that you're going to be, as you retain it more and more of the information, then you can space out the amount of time in between studying the material, which means that eventually you're going to space out the amount of time in between you looking at the information or studying the information, because this is all about retaining the information that you've learned, right? And so as you process the information, evaluate the information often, that means it locks it into long-term memory, and then eventually you'd be able to easily retain that or retrieve that information when, for example, you take a final exam later on, which means that when you're studying for the final exam, you don't have to cram. I'm assuming a lot of you probably did that in high school, where you crammed for the exams and just studied everything. But this avoids that, and avoids the stress, right, of studying for a final exam, because if you have everything retained in your long-term memory long before you take the final exam, it makes it easier, right, to retrieve and do well on your exams. So keep this in mind, is that, and this is kind of what's called space practice, where you space out when you review the information. So in the beginning, you want to review information as often as possible. And then later on, when you feel that you do know and are familiar with the information, you can space out the amount of time you will look at that information. Okay. Any questions about that? No questions? Does that make sense? Thumbs up if it makes sense. No thumbs up. I don't see any thumbs up going up. Wait a minute. Okay, good. Okay, I see that. Okay, excellent. All right, so keep that in mind. So this is one of the things that you can do, is really think about how you're scheduling your study time, so that you don't have to stress out when you take final exams or midterms, right? All right, so that's the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And it's an illustration of how much information you lose over time, basically. Okay, so next what we're going to be talking about is memory. And so it's also called information processing system. So again, memory is called the information processing system, because the reason why it's called that is because you receive information, you process, decide how you're going to process the information, and that's memory, right? All right, so the first thing is you will have, when you receive information, there's a sensory input. So what are those senses that you're going to receive the information through? What are the different ways that you'll receive information?
Sensory,
Yeah, but what kind of, like, what are they specifically?
visual,
Yes. Visual. What else?
Audio.
Audio. Yes.
Reading and writing.
Well, that would be, what senses are being used there?
Oh.
It's
Sight.
visual, right? Visual.
Oh, okay, I see.
Right. Could be touch. What else is there? What else? What other senses do you have? Right? Do you have taste? Right? I mean, you won't taste information from class unless you're taking a cooking class, but those are different ways, right? The senses are different ways that you receive information. Smell is another one, right? So those are senses. So what happens is that you will receive the information, right? But it will go into what's called, it goes into sensory memory. So you'll remember it because you can relate through it through the senses. And it takes about 3 minutes before you kind of move on to something else. Either you'll decide to forget it or not. And then in order for you to remember it a little longer, then you have to pay attention to it, right? You'll have to notice whatever that is, that the information that you're receiving. And that goes into short-term memory, which is broken up to two different things. It's immediate memory, and then you do have to move into what's called working memory, where you try to remember things. For example, if you're meeting somebody for the first time, what you probably are doing is looking for ways to remember it. So you're thinking about, oh, okay, that person's, first name is John, and he's wearing a red sweater, he's tall, etc. So you're finding ways to remember things, and you're going over that information basically. So again, short-term memory is broken up into immediate and working. Immediate is when you decide that you're going to receive the information, remember it, and then you're going to find ways to remember that information by remembering some details, right, regarding the information. So then what happens is that in order for you to move it into the next type of memory, you have to use some active strategies, right? So what are some of the active strategies that you think can be done in order to move it into basically long-term memory? What are some of the things that you can do? And I think we've covered some of those things, but what are some of the things that we've already covered that you can do? Either unmute or you can type it into the chat. What is one thing that you guys are doing that you learned earlier in class that is an active strategy?
writing down notes.
Yes. So definitely the Cornell notes, definitely the flashcards. So for Cornell notes, you're doing multiple things, right? For strategies, you are, first of all, taking the notes in class, right? And using maybe pictures, which could include arrows or different types of pictures. prompts, words that you can remember. You'll also, what you're doing with that, so there's multiple things that you're doing as far as helping your memory. So after class, what you're going to do is you go into the recall column. You're going to think about, well, how do you write it in a shorter way where you can remember the larger information or the more detailed information. So in the recall column, you could be asking questions, you could be putting short prompts or even pictures, right? So that's another thing that you're doing in order to remember the information. Then the third thing you're doing with the Cornell notes is you need to figure out, do I understand the information? And so in the summary section of your Cornell notes, that's where you're going to write down everything you remember about that topic. So there's multiple things that are happening that are helping you remember the information, helping your memory, right? Move it into long-term memory. Then after that is basically using that as a tool by using the recall column to prompt your memory. So you'd cover up the larger area, answer the prompts or the questions you've created in the short term, not the short term, but the recall column. So that's one way to use that. And then the other thing would be transitioning those notes into flashcards. So with the flashcards, you have to summarize that even more onto the flashcards, because the flashcards shouldn't have tons of information, but it's going to allow you to really think and interact with the information to create these note cards. So that's another strategy as far as moving any kind of information into long-term memory. Okay, any questions about that? So again, it's to move things into long-term memory, you need to find different strategies to do that. And we're going to talk about more strategies that you can use in order to move that into long-term memory. So hold on. So basically what you're doing with these active strategies is encoding, right? So the brain is kind of like a computer, right? For computers, you have to encode things in order to have it stay in the computing memory. So that's called encoding. So you're going to encode all of these so that you have some kind of relationship with that information. All right. So that you can basically easily retrieve the information whenever you need it for either exams or a presentation, or if it's about, people that meeting people and remembering them as far as the details about them. So again, active strategies will encode the information that you've learned into long-term memory so that you can easily retrieve the information for future use. Okay. Any questions about that? And tell me if I'm moving too fast. Hopefully I'm not. Okay. Yes, go ahead, Brendan.
So what was encoding again?
Encoding is basically coding it in your brain so that you can easily recall it. So you're filing it away in your brain. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So you're finding ways that you can, it's like a file cabinet or like a computer, right? You're creating files and you're putting it in different categories. So that's what you're doing in your brain. So the active strategies help you to do that, to move it into these different files so that you can easily look up the file to retrieve the information. Any other questions? All right. So let's go into, before we go into the strategies, I wanted to go into this a little bit, because a lot of things do affect memory. And so if you think about sort of the biology of the brain, so it's made of chemicals. A lot of the things that happen with memory, it's about sort of the electrical sort of function of the chemicals, how they're sort of transmitted to neurons and synapses, etc. So there are different things called the neurotransmitters. So those are released. You receive information, you prompt that information somehow by some of the strategies you use, right? And that's kind of shooting off information throughout your brain. And so if you think about that in sort of biological terms, right, there's a lot of things that your brain needs in order to function well, right? So if you think about the brain, the brain needs oxygen, the brain needs nutrients, the brain needs rest, right, in order to function well, right? So, and there's different things that will affect the function of the brain, right? So if you think about, some of these things that are going to pop up on here. So information overload, that might, be about stress, right? And if you're stressed, you're not getting a lot of oxygen, maybe not a lot of rest. When I say stress and you're not getting a lot of oxygen, oftentimes what happens when someone's stressed, they're not going to breathe as well, which means their breathing may be a little bit more shallow, or sometimes they'll stop breathing. So there's not a lot of oxygen that goes to the brain. So information overload, again, stress, cigarettes, definitely, because cigarettes definitely cut off the oxygen from your brain. So that will definitely affect how you remember things. Drugs, definitely, right? Because it affects how your brain functions, how it processes information, right? And it also will affect maybe how you get rest, how you get oxygen, and a lot of times nutrients, right? Alcohol will also affect your brain because, again, it affects all of these different things, right? And then a lot of other sort of health stuff, high blood pressure, lack of nutrients if you don't eat the right foods, lack of sleep, which is your brain needs the rest, right? So if you need a lot of rest in order to replenish the brain, because over sleep, a lot of the functions in your body or a lot of the cells, that's when they get replenished, is when you sleep, basically. Of course, lack of oxygen. So those are some of the things that you want to keep in mind as far as your brain being something that's biological, right? And it'll affect how you think, how you process information. So you want to think about some of the choices you make and why you might not be able to do well, let's say academically. But any questions about any of these? Comments or questions? No, do you guys understand? So hopefully you guys are, taking this in and realizing some of the things that you should be changing, because I think a lot of things, I think you can do some of these things in moderation, but when you take it over to a place where some of these things are abused, and of course, yes, it's definitely going to have a big effect on how your brain functions, or sometimes even how your body functions, and that how that affects your memory. All right. No questions about that? All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about, which now we're going to go into the strategies, how you can treat the information that you receive. So there's different ways that you can do that. And so the first thing is obvious, right? To understand the information, right? But to understand the information basically is to make sense of it, right? To connect it with something you already understand. So the first thing is finding ways to understand the information and connecting it to other things that you might have learned or experienced. Right? The next thing is organize it. So organizing it can mean a lot of different things. It could mean that you're putting information in different categories. When you're doing your note cards, you're probably doing that where you're deciding how the information is gonna be presented on your note card so that you can easily understand the information. Organize it might also mean putting it in certain files as far as what belongs in, let's say, under, maybe you're looking at something that's more about society, you're organized it that way, or something that's more in the arts, etc. So finding ways to organize the information so you can relate to the information, right? So we're talking about these things in more general terms right now, but we're going to talk about probably a little bit more specific things as we move along. We already talked about space it, which essentially means that you're allowing time for your brain to process information. So you'll look at information. So we mentioned earlier about how much you should be studying and how often. So if you basically decide to look at information, you want to allow some time in between so you can process in the information and allow your brain to do that, and then create another time that you're going to be looking at it, and then space the time that you will study the information. Instead of studying it, for example, when you're cramming, you're putting everything into one time basically and trying to study everything instead of allowing your brain to process the information so it's easy for you to remember and recall the information. So space it is basically allowing your brain to process the information and creating a schedule where you're allowing that. Okay, chunk it. So chunk it is taking a larger project or a larger chapter or the larger information that you have from the lecture notes you've taken and breaking that down into smaller chunks so that you can go over the information and remember the information in these smaller chunks rather than being overwhelmed with a larger amount of information that you have to study. So does that make sense about chunking the information? So one way as far as chunking it would be, let's say that you're studying your note cards, right? So you could do chunk it could mean studying maybe 5 cards at a time. Or if you're looking at reading a chapter, reading 2 pages at a time, or reading, let's say, 5 paragraphs at a time. That's what chunking is, just breaking it down into smaller amounts so that it's easier for you to process information and also not get stressed about having all this stuff to remember, basically, right? All right, so the next thing is test it. So what are some ways that you can test it? And you can put that
Flashcards, note cards, going over your cues.
Yes, and going over the pre-test in chapters, right? Or the post-test in chapters are different ways. What are other ways that you can test yourself? What are some other ways? Quizlet, yes, definitely. Quizlet. So making your own quiz, right? And quizzing yourself. Also testing each other, right? If you're in a study group, just asking each other questions, right? Yes, friends or family, right? Having them ask you questions, definitely. Or even part of testing, I guess, would basically share that information with other people, right? That might be another way to kind of test yourself as far as how much you remember. So yeah, definitely. Good. All right, so the next one, which let's see what you guys come up with. And I know probably some of you guys are making faces, but enjoy it. So enjoy the information, right? That's another way to remember information. So what do you think that's it? What's enjoy it mean? Like, what can you do? What are some of the things? Remember, it's about
Create acronyms that relate to the material.
Yes, definitely. Acronyms or acrostic. Remember, acrostic is creating a phrase, right? So So acronym would be like SMC, but acrostic would be like, I don't know if any of you guys have taken music, but to remember the notes of on the lines, every good boy does fine, right? So those are so if you think about it, it's E, every G, every good boy, B, boy does D, does F for fine, etc. Right? So playing around with those things, right? Acrostic and acronyms. Yes, excellent. What are other ways?
Also creating images in your head that relate to the work that help you memorize.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Or even drawing pictures, right? On your note cards, right? Will help you remember information. Any other things? Any other things you can do? Anybody use colors? No, no one uses colors.
Yeah, to highlight stuff that I think is important, key factors, main points.
Yeah. Or creating a system where, like you would do maybe all the main topics are blue, all the subtopics are green, but that helps you remember information. So if you're in an exam, you can kind of remember, if you're visual, what your notes look like, right? So doing that. How many of you guys have created raps to remember information? Do I not have any hands there? No one's ever created a song or a rap? No? So that's another way, right, to play around with the information, is creating a song or a rap with the information, right? So that's another way to enjoy the information. And I think for a lot of students, they find that they can easily remember information, because I think a lot of you guys, remember songs, right? From, artists that you enjoy, right? So this is another way to kind of play around with it, right? Creating a song or a rap so that you can remember the information. Stories, you can create stories. We're going to talk a little bit about that a little later on. And I think one of it's not exactly a story, but one of the videos talks about the method of loci. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So those are different ways, right? So studying and trying to remember things, it's not about reading your notes over and over again, right? Because I think that gets tedious, and that is definitely not helpful, where you just that's all you're doing is just reading your notes over and over again. You want to find ways that work for you so that you can remember the information. Okay, so there's not one way that you can do it, but find a way, a strategy that will help you, right? All right, manipulate it. So how many of you guys are kinesthetic? So kinesthetic, remember, you guys know what that is, right? You should remember that. Oh yeah, somebody mentioned that they listened to Hamilton in their history class. Yeah, definitely, right? That's a good way to kind of remember some of that historical references. But also if you think about Hamilton, right, there's a lot of moving around, right? So manipulated could be when you're studying about information is moving around. What some students will do, and I've seen some of my friends do it, where when I was in college, where they would get a ball, right? Like a small, maybe tennis ball, and just bounce it off the wall, right? To help them sort of either keep a beat and then study the information, but using something active, right? To remember information. It could be, you just moving around your hands when you're trying to study, so that you can remember that, or finding or figuring out different clues, right? That you can create. Right. So for example, maybe you're in an exam and, you're trying to remember something, and while you're studying, equated, let's say, pulling an ear for something. So you're trying to remember stuff. You're going, oh, I can't remember that. And then you decide, well, let me pull my ear because that's what I did when I was studying. And then you can remember information. So doing things like that, right? Saying things out loud definitely helps I think for a lot of people when they're studying, to move it into the long-term memory. Again, for kinesthetic people, moving around the room when you're studying helps you remember information. So those are different things. So again, studying and trying to remember information doesn't have to be one way. Everyone does it differently. So just keep that in mind. And you want to find the way that it's best for you to be able to recall the information. Okay. And again, I just want to repeat, because I know a lot of people think, well, studying is all about just sitting down and just reading your notes over and over again. That does not work. I've never seen that work for anybody. But if you can take some of this information that we've kind of gone over and figure out, well, how do I use this information so that I can study what I need for a specific class? And definitely, you know, I definitely encourage you to make it fun as far as studying, because studying should be fun. Okay. All right. Some other things that I want to cover is, and I think some of the things are on the screen right now. So mnemonics we already covered. So mnemonics are memory devices. So those are the acronym and acrostics, right? Mnemonics. Repetition, right, is one way. And if you think about repetition, the good example would be the Cornell notes, right? Because that would have you repeat things over and over again, but in different ways. So repetition should not be you going over something in the same way every time. It should be different every time you look at the information. So keeping that in mind is finding ways to repeat information without doing it the same way. So again, like the Cornell notes, you're taking notes initially, right? So that's one way. Then you'll look at your information after class and then think about the information and figure out, well, how do I summarize that in my recall column? So that's another way, right, to go over the information and lock it into your memory. And then the next thing you would do is do the summary, right? So that's another repetition. And then the other repetition would be creating your note cards, right? And then the next repetition would be using your note cards. So that is repetition, is looking at things in different ways rather than just looking at the information in just one way every single time. Let's see, other things that you can do is the video, if you guys watched it in the video module, basically that is about using something, you know, right? So that would be the, let's say it's the room or the way that you walk to school or walk to work, whatever it might be, and using different points along that path or in your room to associate it with something that you have to remember. Okay, does that make sense? So basically, in the video, he's talking about, you know, let's say that, I don't know exactly which topic he used, but let's say you're trying to remember something for this class, right? Maybe even this lecture. And if you're thinking about how information is processed, right? So you want to think about, maybe in your room, you have a desk, you have a bed, you have a chair, you have your computer in front of you, right? So if you think about, okay, how do I associate my room to the information, right? And so what you're going to probably do is think about, well, first I need to sit down so that in front of my computer. So maybe that represents the information processing system because you're in front of a computer where you'll see a lot of information.
Yes. I'm confused. Which one of these four are we covering now?
We're talking about the method of loci, which is in that video that I posted.
Oh, did we have to watch that last week?
You should be watching it like at some point. No, that was for this week.
Oh, I didn't watch it.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Just be able to just watch it at some point, right? Soon. But that's just one technique, right, that you can use. So think about that. What kind of information can you associate, right, with what you have to learn? And it can be something that's really crazy. It can be something that's, you know, off in left field, but it's about finding ways to remember the information. So one of the things that you could do is think about something that you enjoy, right? And associate that information that you have to remember with what you enjoy, right? So I don't know if it's football, there's different places that you can think about, right? Maybe the way the team sort of set up, or how the different ways they score to relate to some of the information that you need to remember. Baseball, there's definitely a lot of math stuff you could probably associate with that once you get to more advanced math, right? So think of different ways that you can associate the information you have to learn so that it's easier for you to recall the information, right? So questions about that? Yes, no? Okay, so come back at 12:40. And then I'll be in here if you have any questions about anything. Recording. Okay, so basically we're doing a little memory game, and you can utilize this for other classes too, or even this class to remember information. But right now what I need is nouns, which can be people, place, or thing. It can be a specific person, specific name, business, anything that's a little bit more general. So give me any specific, it could be a band, etc. So give me nouns.
Cherry.
What is it?
Cherry. It was just the first thing that came to my head.
Hold on.
That's a noun, right?
You said Jerry?
I said cherry.
Oh, cherry. Yes. Cherry. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Oh, Starbucks. Okay. Nike. Somebody give me a place.
London.
What?
London.
London. Okay. Harry Styles. Okay. So we're going to start with these and let's see what happens. Because I'm going to convince you guys you can remember 12 words. Okay, without looking at the list. Okay. So I'm going to do a little different than what I do in class. So right now, what I want you to do is on a scratch piece of paper or whatever it might be, create. So it has to be in order. Okay. So the first word you have to use, and the second word, the third word, the fourth word, and then the fifth word. So everything is in order. In this, you're going to create a story, basically, right? So a story, so that would be like, if I'm going to use these 5 words, right? And it's one sentence per word, or it could be a dependent clause in a previous sentence, or the next sentence. So it could be, let's say, I saw some cherries at Starbucks stuffed in a Nike shoe in London where Harry Styles lives, right? So that's the story, right? So create a story. I'll give you guys a few minutes. Just quickly write it out. And I won't collect these, so don't worry. We're just trying to do I just want to kind of show you guys a memory game, which you can utilize. All right. Thumbs up if you're done. Well, actually, does anyone need more time? Okay. So what I want you to do is, so you're going to try and remember this, right? So right now, what I want you to do is go over your story a few times so that you can lock it in your long-term memory. So go over your story a few more times. Just for fun, let's see. Does anyone, can some of you guys share the story you just created? Anybody? Just unmute.
I'll go ahead if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll go ahead.
Yes.
My story is the cherries from Starbucks that come from the Nike store in London are produced by Harry Styles.
Oh, good. Nice. Excellent. Good. Anybody else?
I put Harry Styles is in London getting Starbucks in his Nikes before performing his song Cherry.
Okay. So what you want to do is, because I want to sort of teach you guys how to remember stuff in order. So you're going to you need to switch that around so that Cherry's the first, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, right? In that order. So you might just have to switch around your story because we're trying to get you guys to remember things in order. Anybody else? Okay, so go over it a few more times so you guys remember the story, okay? So what I want you to do right now, and it's hard for me to kind of assess because we're not in person. So now this is for your benefit. So hopefully you guys will be able to do this. So turn that sheet over, okay? Because you guys should have gone over that story a few times already. So turn it over and then see if you can write that story over again. Okay. So turn that sheet over so you can't see what you wrote, and then write that story over again. And let's see how you guys did. All right. So I'm hoping you guys did that. How many of you guys were successful at writing the story exactly the way that you did the original story? Just do a thumbs up. No thumbs up? Okay, good. Okay, why do I just have one person? Everybody else? What? Okay, so, there's a few people. Those of you that were challenged by that as far as repeating the story, like writing it over, let's kind of discuss because I want to make sure you guys can get this. What was the challenge as far as remembering the story you just wrote? Anybody?
I guess the real hard part was, just the initial process of committing it to memory. It sort of got easier as it went along. But
it got easier when you read the story over and over again, or
yeah, but
okay.
it took a
And
while.
then how about when you rewrote it, when you turned the sheet over and rewrote it? How close was it to the original?
Nearly identical.
Oh, good. Excellent. Oh, so you did well. That's good. Good. All right. So I'm assuming everybody else has at least done. Okay. So the next thing I want you guys to do is, so you're not going to look at the sheet that you have in front of you. Okay. So remember, I wanted you guys to remember the words in order, right? So I'm going to take that screen off. So see if you can recite it. So say it out loud, what the words are.
And I'm confused. So we're writing down the 5 words again?
No, don't write it. Just recite it to yourself. And then let's see how close you got to it. Okay, so you guys should have recited it. So now how many of you guys got all 5 words in order? Good. Okay, good. Excellent. All right. So let's kind of add on more words, right? So you're going to continue your story, right? So we're going to do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so we're going to have you guys remember 12 words in order, okay? All right, so if I can get more words, so either type it in chat or just say it out loud. Give me so they're nouns. I need nouns. So it can be person, place, or thing. It could be a car, a specific car. It could be a band. It could be a specific place, maybe a restaurant. Could be any kind of noun. Could be your own name if you want it included. So give me a few more words. Okay, so we have park, okay. Dog. Give me something really out there. Like, Really crazy. Noun. It could be a concept. It could be a philosophical concept. Okay, good. How about a band? Give me a band. How about a place? Give me a place, like someplace that's really crazy out there. Oh, good. I like that. Okay, somebody put this, but I'm gonna put this is the last word. Okay. All right. So go to the story that you wrote. So you're gonna continue this story. So whatever the story is, right? You're gonna continue. So my story was I saw cherry stuffed in Starbucks, stuffed in a Nike shoe in London, where Harry Styles lives, in a park where he walks his dog named Angel, and his fish who likes the Beatles that left for Jupiter, and there was a lot of laughter. Okay, so do a story. So continue with those words in order.
Wait, so we're adding this on to the first sentence,
Yeah,
right?
yes, continue your story. Yes.
Oh, I left to go to the bathroom for a sec. Do we have to make a sentence with these new words now?
Yeah, you're gonna continue your story.
With from park to laughter.
No, so you did the story that ended with Harry Styles, and then you're gonna move
Yeah.
on with the story. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay, who needs more time? Anybody need more time? Okay, just a couple more minutes then. All right, so you should be almost done with your story. So let's kind of think about, you created this story. Let's say that, you have an exam and you have to remember words in order, right? Or terms in the exact order. So I'm going to give you a few moments to kind of go over your story a few times, but think about other ways, right, that you can remember the information, right? So what are some of the other ways we talked about that you can sort of play around with this information so that you can remember? So right now I had you guys just kind of read it over and over again. So that's sort of one way. But what are some other ways that you can utilize in order to remember the information? What are some of the other ways that you can remember the list of words? Well, the story, actually. How can you remember the story? Anybody? So some of you guys are visual, right? So one thing you could do is draw pictures, right, of your story. So that might be helpful. So creating that, or some of you are a little bit more kinesthetic, so using movement to remember that information. The movement can be pretty simple. It could be just you just tapping your pen against the table, whatever it might be, right? So different ways, right, to take advantage of your learning style to remember the information. So do that for whatever technique that you want to use to kind of reinforce your memory of your story. And then we'll come back to it. I'm gonna have you guys do pretty similar thing to what you did earlier. All right, who needs more time to memorize their story? Anybody need more time?
Wait, so we have to set like the story with all 12 words from memory now?
Yes. All right. So I'm assuming you guys all did that. So find a blank area on your sheet where you can't see the other story that you or the story that you wrote out. All right. So what I want you to do is write it out the same way, right? So repeat the story, but don't look at anything else. Let's see how much you can remember as far as your story. So do that now. All right. Who needs more time? Anybody need more time? Okay. Who got their story exactly duplicated? Like it was exactly the everything was in order. It's the same story. Who thumbs up if you did that? Anybody? Good. Good. All right. So that's good. Some of you guys got it. So anyone challenged by doing that so we can kind of figure out what else you might need to do? Anybody else challenged by that? Memorize all that? Okay, so here's the next thing I want you guys to do is put that sheet away where you can't see it. Okay, so what I want you to do is, and I guess we'll do it this way. Let's have you, so anybody that wants to try, if you can say all the 12 words in order. Who wants to try? Just I want you to unmute yourself and see if you can do all 12 words without looking at anything else.
I'll go ahead and try them. I didn't really write them down. Everything that I've done is I've just tried to remember it off the top of my head. So like all the writing you told us to do, I just remembered the top of my head.
Okay, so do all 12 words in order then.
It was Cherry, Starbucks, Nike, London, Harry Styles, Park, Dog, Angel, Fish, the Beatles, Jupiter, and Laughter.
Yeah, good. Excellent. Nice. Anybody else want to try? So don't look at anything. Okay.
I mean, I could do all the words. I just don't remember the order.
Okay, so because part of the assignment was to remember in order. So let's see what you get. Let's just do it. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Cherry, Nike, Starbucks, Harry Styles, London. What was the other one? Oh yeah. Park, Dog, Angel, Fish, the Beatles, Jupiter, Laughter.
Oh, okay. So you got
Did I say
most of it.
Starbucks?
Yeah. So the only thing that you switched around were the Starbucks and Nike and London and Harry Styles.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know what, like I wrote the like stories with the words, but I didn't. Were we supposed to put them in that order specifically? Like I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh, whoops.
So is that why you did? Oh, that's probably why you didn't remember it in order, right?
Yeah, I just incorporated all the words in the story. I didn't know we had to do it in a specific order. That's my bad.
Yeah. So because part of this particular strategy is if you have things that you need to remember in order, this might be one strategy that you might want to use is just creating a story, right? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense, but it helps you remember that because sometimes when you come up with things that are a little absurd, it's easier to remember for some reason than just the actual sort of items that you have to remember, right, for a class. Anybody want to try? Let's see if you can do this. If you, all I need is you to say the words, but I want you to recite it in reverse order. So who wants to try to do it in reverse order without looking at anything else? Say the words in reverse order.
I'll go ahead and try again.
Okay, go ahead.
So it was Laughter. It was Laughter, Jupiter, the Beatles,
Uh-huh.
Fish, Angel, Dog, Park, Harry Styles, London, Nike, Starbucks, Cherry.
Yes, excellent, definitely good. So this is a good technique if you have anything that you need to remember in order, right? What class do you think you could use this for? Or what kind of class can you use this for? This particular strategy. So anybody? Anybody? Like what class could you use it? Anybody in nursing? No one in nursing? English? Yes, definitely English. Nobody? So you can use it like, let's say in a history course, right? Because a lot of times you have to remember things in order, right? Or maybe art history course where you have to remember the different periods of art. Or let's say that, you're taking, I don't know, a biology course and you have to remember things according to their phalia kingdom, etc., right? That might be helpful. Or if you need to remember sort of parts of the body and where they are, right? So this could be a strategy to use, basically, right? So any questions about this particular strategy? So there's a lot of different ways that you can remember information, and then just make it fun. Let's do this right now. Think about a class that you are being challenged by as far as remembering the information. So think of a class, right, that you have or have had before, and trying to recall the information, right? So think of that. Actually, you know what? If you can type it in chat, like a class that you're having difficulties sort of remembering the information, if you can just type it in chat, just to get an idea of where everyone, oh, okay. So if everyone, if you guys can type it in chat. Nothing else? Okay. So
Wait,
so
what were we supposed to type in chat? Sorry, I was.
a class that you're challenged by as far as remembering the information for either for exams. Okay. All right. So we have some examples there. Now for so math, I think for that class, it's about doing the so there's a lot of different things, or not a lot of different things, but there's some things that you need to do is in class is just writing all the whenever the professor writes out a problem, basically is just writing those problems down. Also looking for different tests that might be available either online or in your textbook, right? It's about practice. Math is about practice, and you have to do things over and over again in order to set that in your memory. So it's also about looking for, because YouTube has different, if you look on YouTube, you can probably find different strategies as far as how to remember different formulas. So looking at that will also help. But I think math essentially is about practice to remember the formulas. You may be able to kind of create something, do something creative with the formulas, but I think that might be a little bit more difficult because it's the concepts are a little bit more, I would say, straightforward, and sometimes it's hard to kind of develop something that's a little bit more creative with that. Or depending on what math course, let's say if it's statistics, then relating it to, let's say, baseball, might be an easier way to remember the information. So applying it to real world circumstances might be helpful depending on the math. If it's calculus, and I can't think of something that's more everyday that you can apply it to. I know statistics you can because you use that in a lot of different things. But again, it's practice. Now for bio, there's a lot of different parts, right? That you can you have to remember, right? Or I don't know which type of bio that you're looking at, but you can probably create some stories, right, regarding some of the concepts, like crazy stories, right, that you can create out of the concepts to remember, like we just did with these words. Pictures, if you're more visual, basically, as far as your your best way of learning, right? English. So what's for English? What is it as far as remembering the information? Because I think there's a couple people that wrote English. Is it regarding the details of stories, or what is it? Or is it styles, or is it if anyone can give me like you can type it in chat too. Like what's an example of something that you have difficulties with remembering how to do or remember or recall? If it's authors and stories, then I think if you're visual, I think that might be easy to kind of just draw pictures of the stories, right? Something simple that you can help you recall the information. It could be even remembering, if it's remembering the author and what they wrote. Just think of a crazy sort of short story about the author that you can remember. It doesn't have to be, you know, real or actual. It could be something that is crazy, but it helps you remember the information about that author, right? Or the way they wrote, etc. Let's see, any other strategies other people have used before? Any other strategies for any of these classes, math, bio, or English? For this class, there's a lot of information, so it's definitely using these strategies that we've kind of mentioned as far as remembering the information, right? And I think because there's a lot of information, is chunking the information into smaller pieces rather than thinking of the different topics in sort of a bigger scope. So thinking of them in smaller pieces and studying them in smaller pieces is helpful, I think, for this class. But I think, like, if you're used to creating songs or raps, I think that might be a good way to remember things, right? For this class, I think too. That could be for English too, right? Creating a rap. Like somebody mentioned watching Hamilton for their history class. So thinking of ways to kind of create that for yourself for the English course, I think might be good, or for any course, right? Any other questions about memory or anything like that? No questions? Any questions about, as we kind of move on to the next thing, the ed plan? Anybody like having any challenges with that? I know it's not due till, I think it's the 12th. And I also, definitely suggest you meet with the actual counselor to talk about some of those things. But any questions about that?
Well, I plotted out, the classes I'm going to take, this coming spring, but how exactly do we plan out the classes we're going to take after that? Do we just
So yes, so basically, you said you have your next term as far as what classes you're going to take.
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Okay. So remember that you filled out the courses for your major on that form and the courses that you need for your general education, right? So you need, for your degree, you need the major, right? And you need your general education, and you need to get up to 60 units. So the 60 units would be electives. So you have those all on your forms as well as the prereqs. So then what you're going to do is use that information to determine when you want to take classes. Does that make sense?
Okay.
That's why we had you just look up all the classes you need before you even started looking at, well, what course do I want to take for each term? Because then you have something to refer to, right? So if you're, let's say you're thinking of, well, I need more math courses, right? So then you're going to look at that sheet and go, okay, where am I with my math? Because you filled out the prereq area. And then you have to determine, well, you have a target and when do you want to complete the math? And so if you haven't done the prereqs, then that's probably something that you want to think about as far as scheduling for the next quarter or the next 2 quarters, right? Semester, sorry. I'm stuck at the UCLA thing because UCLA is on a quarter system, but semester. So that's why you were going over that information, because that should help you determine what you want to look at as far as prioritizing what classes you're going to take for the next term
Okay.
and the following term.
Okay. So we just use the classes in the plan our final.
Yeah. Yeah. And then definitely go to a counselor, because then they can help you sort of look at other things. If let's say that a course is not, the counselor may say, hey, why don't you change this because you might want to do this first. But having sort of a preliminary schedule before you go into the counselor is definitely good, because they can at least see what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Okay. Of course, none of this is set in stone, right?
No, it's not. No, nothing is. You can definitely always change stuff.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions about that before I move on to the next thing? All right. So let me move on, because I want to clarify, because this might be, and I wish other people stayed on, because I want to explain what's going to be happening for next week. Okay. I'm just moving around my screen right now because I got a lot of things on my screen. So next week is week 9. Okay. And week 9, we will have, or I will have a Zoom session set in where we're going to be meeting like this, except for week 9, it's, let me bring this up. Usually we go to the library to do, when we're in person, to the library to go to spend the whole time at the library, but it's a little different. So right now what I did was I posted the workshops regarding the next assignment. So the next assignment that's due in,
Wait, so those are the videos we need to watch next week, right?
yes, but I'm going to explain to you how that's going to. So you have an assignment called the Library Project MLA Works Cited page that's due on the 5th, basically, which is after next week, right? So you'll have next week, but the Works Cited page is not a paper, okay? It's just a Works Cited page that you're going to be creating. But in order to figure out how to do that, you're going to next week. And the reason why I'm sort of doing it a little different, where I'll be in the Zoom if you have questions, but I would suggest watching these before the Zoom session, because the Zoom session would be you just working on the Works Cited page as I'm in the Zoom session. So you can ask questions instead of me just playing the entire workshop during the Zoom session. You can if you wanted to. If you wanted to, you don't have enough time and you just want to play these, these or watch these videos during the Zoom session, that's fine. And then you can ask me questions. But I think it might work better for you if you watch these before you come to class next week, and then utilize that time for you to create the works cited page. Okay, does that make sense? Ask question if it's confusing.
Okay, let me just get this straight. So sometime next week before our next Zoom session, like we should watch those videos, take notes on them, and then on next Friday, we'll use that to create those works cited.
Yeah, so you're going to create the works cited page, because I think that's probably the best way to do that, instead of just sitting in the Zoom, in the Zoom thing and watching the video. And then I put down the times so that you can schedule it for yourself so like this one's the longest, which is 40 minutes, right? So that's about an hour. So you just have to find an hour somewhere to watch it, basically take some notes so you're aware of how to do that. And then find time. These are shorter, right? So you can fit that in. And then, yeah, so one of these, I have to figure out why it's not working, but one of these isn't working yet. So eventually we'll have that working. Yeah, and then just utilize the time, basically, right, during the Zoom session that we have next week. Because I know every time I have it with students, they have a lot of questions. So that's not due until November 5th, but I'm allowing the class time for you to work on it and ask me questions. Okay, so this is the assignment, basically, where you're going to create a works cited page. So I think most of you guys have done research paper, where there's a page where you list everything that you've used for the paper, right? So that's the works cited page. And it's going to be anything that's related to your career that you might want to do, or career occupation that you want to do. So it can be anything under those areas. So it's pretty broad as far as what you're going to be doing.
So next week we're just making the works cited, right?
Yes, you're just going to work on it, and I'm just kind of creating that space for you guys to do it so that you can ask questions.
I was asking, do you want us to like do it step by step, or can we just use like BibMe or EasyBib?
What do you mean? You mean just cut and paste it?
I mean, yeah, like EasyBib, BibMe, those are websites that allow you to,
Yeah, so you'll find from the videos, they'll mention that those are available, but oftentimes they may not meet the proper format that you need. So even if you're going to use those, you're going to have to really make sure that because for any research paper, for any resources that you list, it has to be pretty correct. Like all the periods have to be in the right place, all the italics have to be in the right place, all the indents have to be in the right place, etc.
Oh, so
yeah, so those won't necessarily work because they may not, and some of them might have extra info, or some of them might be missing some information that you need.
So we should make them by hand. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can still use those as sort of the starting point, but you're going to have to still edit your information to make sure it's meeting the MLA format.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so does that make sense about next week? So next week, watch these videos beforehand. If you decide instead that you want to watch it during the Zoom class, that's fine. But I'm going to be in the Zoom session just to answer questions and clarify anything about creating the works cited page. Okay, any questions? No? Because I don't want a lot of confusion next week. I know there's a few people missing, so hopefully they'll be able to get the information. But does that make sense? So there's not going to be an actual lecture. right, during next class, but I will be available in the Zoom for you to answer questions while you work on the assignment. So you're going to be working on the assignment during class. So hopefully you fully utilize that and then just watch the videos before you come to class so you know what's happening and stuff. All right, any other questions? Yes. No. Okay. So, it's 1:29 right now. And so we're gonna cut class shorter because there wasn't a lot of info and stuff today. But I wanted to give time for people to ask questions and stuff. So I'll be in here. I would say since it's a shorter class, probably until let's say 2:00. If someone has something that's a little longer, that's fine. We have time, but I'm just gonna put it out there. It's until 2:00. If you want to wait until then, but we're gonna end class, and I'll be here to answer questions. And if you have questions in the meantime, remember that in the there's the module for discussions. So you can ask questions about the specific assignment there, basically. All right, so let me let everyone go. Everyone have a good weekend, and then I'll be here to answer any questions people might have.